Starting the recording, sir. Okay, so.
Very good. Thanks, folks, for attending. Oh,
Yep.
I think, Doug, you talk first, right?
Yeah. I'll kick it off. Fantastic. So again, greetings and welcome to today's educational program, Managing Distributed Training Communities. This is Doug Wood with the ASQ Quality Management Division, joining the program today from Fairway, Kansas. So today's program is indeed being recorded. Any views expressed in this webinar are for general educational purposes only and do not represent official views or positions of the sponsoring or presenters' organizations. A video recording link of today's program will be sent via an email 24 hours after the webinar. This email will also document your recertification units for ASQ for attending this event. So we're looking forward to your comments and questions, and we'll invite you to, shut off your cell phone and shut the door, warm up your fingers, give us your input. We want to hear. If you have a comment or a question, we have a chat window that is available on the right-hand side. We also have a Q&A window. So, you're not going to see the other attendees. We just set this up for. You'll see yourself as an attendee, but you can put your questions in the Q&A box or the chat window. Dan has kindly added a posting here in the chat window, okay, which I'm going to make sure to add, and we'll put that in also at the end of the talk, okay. So that you can find a link and go in and follow along, okay, or get the slides if you wish. So today we have the pleasure of hearing from Dan Castle. I'd like to welcome him to our webinars. I want to tell you that Dan's work includes deploying business excellence programs across large multinational corporations in the USA, India, and China. His experience includes work at Hewlett-Packard from the USA, the Tata Group from India, and Huawei Technologies from Mainland China. So Dan, say hi.
Hello. Okay.
Okay, so Dan, the floor is yours. I will move the
Thank
presenter over to you, and you're ready to go now.
You are so kind. Thanks for attending, folks. I appreciate it. We're going to be going through a lot of material. I'm not going to be able to cover it in much depth. I'll talk about a few particular things, but then we'll try to leave some time at the end for Q&A to see if there's any particular places you'd like to focus. We're talking about distributed training communities. This is material drawn, I guess I'll say, as a case study type of material, because this is documenting things that I've done with at least 3 particular companies, and it's trying to say things that I found that worked. It's not necessarily telling you what you should be doing, but hopefully you'll get some insight into what you might be able to do with these kind of things. The information we'll cover today relates to real-world experiences in large multinational organizations. It addresses strategic level approaches that require the active participation of the highest leaders, which is why the target audience is what it is. In each case, the senior leaders of the units within each of these large multinational corporations are also involved. Many that have very large businesses on their own. So as we talk about the distributed training, it is not the experiences are not specific to say there's just one unit that is large. It would be a multinational corporation made up out of many units. And so we look at those who are leaders, CEOs, CQOs, CHROs, as far as being able to set strategy across these global organizations. One of the challenges that people have at the lower level is trying to take concepts such as we talk about here and move those up to be embraced at the higher level. And that's a whole subject on its own. But also the feet on the ground to deploying the kind of training we talk about here include the expert practitioners and members of the extended training community. The experiences described here touched upon quality programs. So black belts, master black belts are often influential in the design, execution, and improvement of the training systems. This material that we're going to talk about here is not about academic communities, nor communities made up of people whose major responsibility is training. Process training and approaches to learning and development are very important, but they're not the primary focus of this presentation. I'm happy to engage in further discussion of those areas if you're interested. Okay. So in the quality area, deployment of approaches through training often carries a strong organizational culture component. Since this is the case in the three companies described, there will be a few observations on how to successfully move such cultural change forward. Key areas to work on are dealing with extremely different cultural aspects across the organization, designing the training approaches to be low cost or self-funding through use of volunteer resources and resources honed within the target business units, and ensuring both leadership and organizational support through connections to effective company value systems. The information presented is drawn from my direct experiences in the USA, working with Hewlett-Packard as the Process Excellence Program Manager for HP's Imaging and Printing Group, working with the Tata Group in India as the Vice President of Operational Excellence, and working with Huawei in the People's Republic of China as the Chief Quality Expert for the Enterprise Business Unit. Each of these organizations have global operations with revenues in excess of 100 billion US dollars. Target audiences included people of almost every nation and culture, extending up and down the value stream, touching upon suppliers, partners, channels, and customers. The culture of each organization was heavily influenced based upon their countries of origin, which impacted both the approaches and effectiveness of their training programs. Okay. Views brought to bear in the three systems addressed were influenced by my personal experiences in academia as a lifelong student and faculty member, as well as my experiences serving on the Malcolm Baldrige Board of Examiners, which brought me into close contact with many of the nation's quality leaders and the processes of leading organizations across the globe. The specific focus for deployment through training were as follows. For Hewlett-Packard, global deployment of a common process improvement system. Many HP units already had some version of Lean Six Sigma in operation. Building commonality and driving results across all units was a desired result. The system went through some iteration, beginning with Sigma Plus. Eventually, the program was renamed to HP Lean Sigma. In Tata, global deployment of the Tata Business Excellence model was the target. Based upon the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award criteria, the TBEM program was operated for many years and is considered a benchmark by the Baldrige program, even though it does not primarily operate in the U.S. Tata is a strong proponent of the Baldrige program. My former boss, Mr. Sunil Sinha, is currently on the board for the Malcolm Baldrige Foundation, and I was on the phone just yesterday with the foundation CEO, Al Faber, discussing ways we could move the work forward and help bring some of the design concepts discussed here to some of their emerging initiatives. And Huawei's focus was the deployment of Huawei Broad Quality. The company had primarily focused their quality efforts in manufacturing and development. The top leader realized that much more was needed if the company was to overcome the negative reputation of Chinese quality, and ISO 9000 was chosen as the vehicle to drive changes to quality thinking, and that's what we build out Huawei Broad Quality around. The material that we're going to discuss here will probably be more about HP and Tata as best practices. Huawei is early in its journey and has significant challenges, so it gets more airtime on the challenges area rather than the success area. Okay, so what we're going to talk about is primary challenge of operating a distributed community is that it's distributed. There's a lot of work being done in creating software and hardware to reduce the barriers that presents. The various tools available may be leveraged to advantage by the skilled practitioner. So a lot of technology being brought to trying to say, how do you bring people together and help them to collaborate? One of the key learnings, though, is that one size does not fit all. There are several reasons for this, including both curriculum design and the role of local leadership. Some of that is that we want the local leaders to embrace what's going on here. And so the more we give them some voice in what shows up in their area, the better we can sell the adoption of the overall program. The more change can be led from within the targeted community, the more likely the change will be effectively adopted. Creating and managing an extended training community requires effective infrastructure and a strong stakeholder management. There are many considerations regarding technology, far more than can be adequately covered today. A few areas to be touched upon are collaboration, connectivity, and collateral management. Collaboration focuses on shared spaces. Connectivity focuses on active communication, and collateral is about the use of the artifacts that you may have in a program, in communication plans and stakeholder management. There are a number of technology suites out there that attempt to integrate various aspects of these three. I'll speak about a particularly valuable resource that I use in HP called HP Rooms in just a moment. It does some collaboration connectivity. However, a few notes about making effective use of technologies. First, become an expert in the technologies which you already have available. Most organizations have technologies. What we're presenting to you now is WebEx. Right now, things that you were not seeing that we kind of hid from you was that Doug, who's helping to monitor this, had to deal with some drawbacks of WebEx. One was that he posted all of the PDF materials that I'm going through now on the web, and WebEx interpreted them sideways. So we've had to manually rotate those. But WebEx has a number of interesting capabilities, but until you look at it and study it and try to become a power user, you really don't know what those are. So the first suggestion is that as you're looking at technology, what you might do, look what you already have. Whatever things your organization is using, study it, figure out what else you can do for it, and you'll find that generally there are a lot of actually good features that most people may not make use of, and I would strongly suggest you become or engage an expert in the use of the technology you already have. And second, just understand the weaknesses of your technology, and especially in the context of the way your organization is. You may feel like you can be operating wonderful large-scale PowerPoint presentations, but if your audience that you're talking to is more likely to be engaging using a smartphone, then you may be using a technology just not going to work because you don't understand the audience you're working with. So always think of the target audience you have. You don't want to make the technology a burden to the people you're working with. At HP, we would have regular meetings of people around the globe, and HP was a leader in the use of immersive rooms. So you would go into the site and you would go into a conference room, and when you were in the conference room, the people on the other side of the desk would be often whatever other country they were, but it was strongly built to make it so you felt you were in the same room. And so we thought, boy, that's a great way to do connectivity. Only whenever we'd have a meeting, we'd have someone from Spain, someone from Singapore, and someone from the U.S., which meant that one of them had to get up in the middle of the night and drive into work in order to be able to participate in the meeting. So in that context, it was actually making the technology a burden to that person. So, alternate technologies that do not require that should have been considered. In the HP program, we made strong use of our internal website for collateral management. It was a location where news would be posted, search tools to find collateral, and the names of the units of the belts were available. So it was very easy for someone to find a improvement resource local to themselves, and part of the role that I had in the central office was helping to connect people to the best resource for either doing projects or for doing training. The materials were both passive. There were some available for people to come to a portal to see, but you would also want to have an active portion of that. So there are emails of materials, of suggestions. In our case, we have a regular emailing of information of interest to HP's improvement professionals. So you wanted to make sure you were not just having your collateral only stay in the passive mode. What we also have been finding in technology is that it's much easier now to develop voice and video. For Huawei's program, given that Huawei operates in, although English is the presumed official language for the company, most business actually will operate in Chinese. So in doing the communications, you wanted to have a much stronger visual aspect to it. So we would do PowerPoint videos using much more picture-oriented kinds of things, and I would develop a series of short videos that would superimpose the speaker onto the PowerPoint materials, so that you would have active interaction with the materials to keep the learners engaged. So do look at these technologies are becoming much more available, much more accessible to people. So do consider those in the way in which you're creating your collateral. Often it's good to be able to have that kind of some kinds of video activities or video materials available, even for face-to-face training, as a kind of break, to kind of mix it up in the training itself. And then other social media continues to evolve, but a lot of that still is kind of in the early days, and I haven't found a great deal of specific value coming out of the blogging and those types of posts, or those types of things. Now, in HP has a product called Virtual Rooms, or had at the time that I was doing this work. And the issue that came up was that we would typically do workshops designed for in-person delivery by the trainers, 2 or 3 day Lean Six Sigma workshops. Classes were generally about 30 students sitting at tables from 4 to 6 students, and periodic table exercises were scattered throughout the days, each followed by a report out of the table discussions. During a certain period of time, travel was significantly restricted, so we were called upon to recreate that approach using a more virtual activity. And what we found is that the use of the HP virtual rooms had several of those kind of capabilities that I referred to earlier, where if you did not become an expert, you wouldn't have noticed them. And in particular, it had things like private and group chats, in-room documentation, certain in-room apps that would allow you to do surveys, question and answers, activity timing, a number of things of that type. And that by taking a look at those, we were able to actually find that we could create breakout sessions where you would, the trainer, virtually would be giving material and going through slide sets, and then could stop and take participants and put them into 4 or 5 separate rooms where they would all have access to their own whiteboard activity and be able to talk, across whatever that is, didn't matter where they were located. And the trainer would have the ability to oversee all this with multiple windows on their computer, and then jump themselves from group to group to be able to interact with those groups during these exercises. So what we were finding we were able to do was very much recreate the in-person experience, surprisingly so. And so that's one of the reasons why I suggest that you look at what's available in front of you and see what capabilities you have and how you can creatively use those. Because this is what I was doing very effectively with HP 10 years ago, and so the material, the products have evolved since then. And what we found was a couple of things. One is that we could also, by doing virtual, we could reasonably spread the training out into multiple half-day sessions rather than 3 days of full days. We could do 6 days of half-days. And what we were surprised to find is that when we did that, the people coming to the sessions became much more, many more of the leadership people, the managers were coming, because that half-day type sessions allowed them to continue to do regular work and then participate in this. So there were a lot of benefits that came from engaging in a virtual room area. But now one of the particular benefits here is that because the training activities we were doing, we were trying to make sure those were being done as much as possible by local resources, that the curriculum that we would develop we could keep in the room, that the curriculum and the app materials could be set so any competent practitioner could very easily come up to speed on doing these virtual training sessions, leading these virtual training sessions. Now, there's also a place for collaborative environments, and an example of one of those is Blackboard. Blackboard has been used in its multiple incarnations for many years in the academic community as both a student and as a instructor. I've made use of it, but its origins are more appropriately for the distance learner sharing materials, sharing assignments, turning assignments back into the professor. It is not particularly oriented towards real-time classes, so it's minimal in effectiveness for use of live workshops. It has a role, this type of just kind of keeping things out there and passing data back and forth for collaboration, but probably a bit of less of a role if you're actually trying to do a bit more of the active learning activities. Now, so one of the pieces that came into clear view when you're working across a multinational is that the curriculum you develop is not going to, if you develop one set of curriculum, it is not going to be particularly effective in many of the target audiences. That cultural shifts certainly, but the type of business someone is in, the particular type of job someone has, all of these things color the way they see the curriculum you might do. So as we approach these, came to the conclusion, I'm going to say this as two ways. One is that even if you're a small organization and you have a small set of people to work with, it's probably a good idea to try to adopt something that's a relatively common approach, something that will be able to grow with you and accept new people, new organizations coming into the fold. In HP, I had certain issues where one HP business unit had adopted Lean Six Sigma from one of the gurus, and a different unit had adopted it from a different guru, and they would fight with each other. And we were saying, no, this is commonality. It's all good things. We're not supposed to fight with each other as to who is the official guru of Six Sigma. So you want to, even as you're beginning a program, start with the end in mind. Do try to design it in a way in which it will be able to interact well with new players and will be able to evolve over time. So, the diversity of community cannot be overstated. At HP, the programs, we configured it differently for manufacturing environments, development groups, call centers. They each had a particular need for certain sets of the tools. At Tata, some of the target audiences even had no electronic access. So when we were training, we had to train the people who did not have any access to computers at all. So we would develop, paper-bound workbooks that would be used, and they would have templates and exercises in those, and students would go through and learn all of the tools, do the exercises, apply them to their real life, and then turn them into their supervisors as part of that program. So be sensitive to whatever the needs are and the capabilities of the target communities, and that means that you want to have good curriculum, but you want to configure it to fit to the particular target communities. And so dynamic curriculum in general, key concept of cascading curriculum, it's respect for the target audience, organizations, and the students. So you're doing it because it does work best for the overall organization, but in order to get the materials you're trying to train adopted, you want them to be pulled into the organization. And so you need to have your target audience understand that you respect them. This is not something you're trying to push on them. This is not an order. This is something that it's a good medicine that will help, and getting them to feel like, yeah, they want that medicine, and they can run that medicine, and they can adapt it properly to their own organization, and they can include their own thinking. All of that helps in stakeholder management, and it helps to get them to pull it in, to accept it, to want it. So in cascading content, when people talk about, oh, what curriculum am I going to use for my Six Sigma or whatever, they always talk about, okay, I'm going to buy that program. And we're saying, no, it's not a book that you're supposed to learn out of. It's a system that you can configure around to make it appropriate for the right place. And it's also a system that should evolve. It's a system that can have multiple versions of things. So it's not a set of classes. And the way the curriculum will show up, it'll be different for different audiences, but you do still want to have some kind of oversight of this overall system that for changing content and priorities. So in the Tata Group, they have an organization that was called the Tata Quality Management Services. And that organization was tasked with the maintenance of the TBEM criteria and the management of the extended set of thousands of TBEM trainers across this very large organization. And they would appropriately include the members of that community in as the curriculum, the TBEM criteria was modified over time, and how it was being applied. You want to have omni-channel thinking, and by that just says use all the ways to communicate, to present things, to let people interact with things. Again, one of the reasons why I said earlier that this program is not for the learning and development organization is that often a learning and development organization is more about the process and less about the content, and so but in the kind of content we're talking about here, it contains a lot of tools in it, things, templates, things of that type. And so you want to have your students have an ongoing interaction with the content. And so while in a class you might be kind of pushing it at them in a offline mode, you want to also have a system behind all this to where they can readily access and make use of the concepts that you're trying to get instilled in the organization. So it's a bigger way of thinking about things. It's not just a, how do I get that class, taught. And then you want robust collateral. And so one of the reasons why I say that is it's saying not dependent on immediate uptake means that, yes, you're going to have a class. But, you know, frankly, much of what happens in the class is going to be forgotten very quickly if it's not in some fashion reinforced, or if it's not in some fashion made available. In Six Sigma, there's often a great deal of training in statistics. And for the most part, anyone who sits in a class in statistics is going to forget it very, very quickly. But you want to have them understand that they can pull in the where they can go to get that material back when it's time for its use in their projects. Okay, so at HP, we ran a program for HP Lean Sigma. Said, okay, there will be a central group, you know, some set of tools such as Pareto charts, things of that type, that we would expect everyone at HP to understand how to do. But then there may be some other things that would be appropriate for a particular business group, and maybe some things that might be more appropriate for a particular business organization. So this is the way we set up the cascading content for the HP Lean Sigma program. As it turned out, you know, over 50% of the content was common, and then about 25% more might be developed by these large business groups. And then individual organizations under their own leadership would add another approximately 25% of content. And then we would still have a central organization that made sure it was doing the development of that content. Now, regarding the trainers and the culture, so in each of these areas, the nature of the work we were doing, which is deploying basically cultural change around quality, we wanted as much of that to be done from within organizations with strong support from local leadership. So in this case, I'll talk about a couple of bits of these communities. And so a community of effective trainers, you want to ensure that there's leadership buy-in. Now, the Tata Group has extreme best practices in this area, largely because the TBEM program has managed to directly link support of its leaders, of the company unit leaders, and those unit board of directors into ensuring that the TBEM content is consumed and applied. But when you're doing it, leadership buy-in, you're needing to make sure that it's clear that what you're doing is not trying to do a training program, that you're driving business results. It's about business results. It is not about training. And so anyone that you engage inside their units who are helping in this training program, that engagement is about business results. It's not about, you know, some side thing. But then you also want to do social dynamics. In this case, I note leadership competition. In the Tata Group, they ensured that the CEOs of their various companies were in a competition to do the best in application of these materials. And so you actually ended up managing to create a social dynamic of peer pressure that drove extreme engagement from senior leaders. So many organizations have a hard time getting senior leader engagement in these kind of things. Tata Group did that very well based upon social relationships across senior leaders of the business units. You want to do whatever you're doing with your training community, ensure that the people who engage as trainers are being rewarded for that. So make sure that the approach that you're doing is codified in the jobs and deliverables of the people that you're engaging. And in this case, you also want to have some central resources to help us out to celebrate the people who are doing this, including having events, and I'll mention those in a moment or two about some of the Tata events. For effective trainers, you want their duties incorporated into the expectations. Okay, now you also want to be able to give them training assignments that are desirable and that help them develop. And you want to have visual engagement of the senior leaders in this activity. So in trainer development, the first thing is that as you say, who do I want to have in this extended community? Because much of what you're doing in this extended community is depending upon people being self-motivated. You want to make sure that the trainers are competent practitioners. So when someone comes into the room, they want to make sure that they respect that the person telling you about things has experience in it and is trusted by their leaders. You would also like to have trainers who know how to train. So whatever you do centrally or whatever, create train-the-trainer sessions. Ensure that the content that they're going to be training is understood, along with bringing them back in to update things on periodic refreshes to whatever content. And you need to have the trainers understand the approaches to adult learning and the idea of the training life cycle. It's prep, present, follow up. It's how you engage with your student population, and then also do a certain amount of personal style coaching. That as you see people doing training, how might they be coached to be more effective? And in that context, we encourage the apprenticeship approach. So, if someone is appropriate for becoming part of the training community, you ensure that they come and attend a session so that they're seeing what's going on, have them operate as assistants in another one, and then let them be a leader but with someone watching them. So, you want to have your training community be good trainers. And these are some of the approaches that we've found effective in doing that. And in order to get people to want to do this, so what we say is, you want to have this be a recognized check mark on the career path. That for Tata, being part of the TBM program was one of the things that says if you're good at doing that, that helps you get to the next level of your career. In HP, we made sure that we were showing that entry into the program was not it was a privilege. It was a recognition, and we made sure that it's not just the person entering it, but their management, their senior leadership knew that admission into this training community reflected well upon them. You wanted to be able to have the trainers feel like they were not just, that it was giving them some opportunity to expand their own scope. So you're having them train other organizations, have organizations train trainers back and forth so that you end up getting a certain amount of cross-organizational transfer. You want to have them have exposures to new areas of the company. Work actively with the trainers to match them up to particular training opportunities that would help their career growth. Have them work with cross-organizational businesses that get some good amount of breadth in the company, or go deeply with intact work teams to learn more about how some other organization might do its work. And then do some valued events. And some of that is that as you're assigning training, there are some places where people would like to be able to go to that place to execute an event. I would have some of my trainers in HP who, if we were doing an event in India, that was where they wanted to go back to because they had relatives, and so we would trade off who took which events based upon how much it felt like a reward to be able to go and do those things. In Tata would actually have a business excellence convention to where all of the people involved as a training community of TBEM would be brought together for 2 days for a very large event, which also included all the senior leaders of the Tata company. So it's basically a recognition event of this set of people. And that's the Tata Business Excellence Convention, and it continues to be a large event in the Tata Group. And it's great that it's pretty much built out as a celebration of these relatively lower level people who run that training community. And then another particular best practice out of Tata is what's called the APL, the Advanced Program for Leaders. And it brings together the people who are leading the push and maintenance of the TBEM program inside of each of the major Tata companies. And we spent a week together going through changes in the material for the next year, talking about lessons learned from the previous year, and how we wanted to go about continuing to maintain the goodness of the program and what new challenges were coming up as we went. So building a community allows it so that when you are working your technologies to connect people up and coordinate, the activities of the overall program. That the community itself, if it's properly engaged, becomes kind of self-diagnostic and self-repairing. That it's very good ecosystem. And as I said earlier, when I look at the long-term program of the Tata Group, it has a great number of best practices that I would always like to go and talk about even further. In Hewlett-Packard, the Lean Six Sigma program was kind of a first for HP, trying to bring together many diverse business groups. And we adopted good practices, and many of them worked better than we thought, and there were some things that we abandoned. But going after it and keeping that community together and doing the stakeholder management was very valuable. As I said at the beginning of this, Huawei has a long way to go. Huawei has quite a bit of difficulty in engaging a larger organization in moving on these things, and so that's an area for further development. Okay, and so I think that's about as much as I wanted to try to get covered today. And so I'm doing the done thing here, which means I think that we can move to the Q&A portion. Doug, is that correct?
Yes, we can do that. Any of you have questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A window on your screen, or you may put them in the chat window. That is another option, and we'll kind of go over some of that. Dan, I want to thank you for your presentation. The content was nicely balanced between a discussion of technology, which of course it would have, but also a discussion of the human environment at which you have to build effectively to do training to humans. I'm assuming that people on the call are not training machines. Okay, they're training people. So therefore, there's a human structure that must be in place. And I do appreciate your comments and specific references to other organizations and what they've done and kind of where they are. So
I'm seeing Jeff Sharp up there.
Yeah, Jeff said how many attendees were there, and we normally don't disclose how many attendees there are. I don't know how important that is. But as an attendee, Jeff, did you have any questions? We want to make sure we spend this time helping people do things, not just discussing how many people were here. This is recorded, by the way, so you'll get a link at the end to the recording. The link will come out in the email tomorrow. Look for it in 24 hours. Okay. So, again, are there any questions? Okay, so here's one. What has been the best recognition to participants that you have seen?
Okay, so in the Tata Group, they have this Business Excellence Convention. And then what they would also do is that the different teams that would be going off to different Tata companies and executing these TVM activities. Those would be teams of about 10 people, 8 people. And the recipients, the senior leaders and their staff of each of these organizations would give feedback on the teams that came to them. And that feedback from these many events would be collated, and then the Tata Group would basically say, okay, we've got all this feedback here, and this is the best feedback we've had on our individual people. And so they would do 2 things. They would, one is recognize like the 5 top trainers, and they would each get their reward. But more importantly, they would recognize the top 5 teams. And so the teams who would be invited to this convention would be given a gift basket, and with from cheese and so forth, and so and liquor, alcohol. So basically, it was team, you did good. and here's something to help you sort that. And so the key recognition piece of it, and then this was presented by senior leaders. So it would have a recognition activity to it, but then it would also be clearly set up to show how social interaction was very important. And within the Tata program, India by its nature is a very social country. As I mentioned kind of earlier on, it's in each of these places were very impacted by the source culture that they came from. And so that was, for me as an American, watching how well that worked. That how when people walked away from that convention, how high the energy was, both in the people who were doing the training kind of things, but the senior leaders also. So this program has had longevity over like 15 years that's kept this thing together, and those types of elements that were introduced by the 2QMS Essential Group over the years, I think, really helped cement that high social energy.
Okay, thank you. Got another question here. Do you find it's difficult to keep people engaged over a WebEx or other tool when they have the ability to multitask, check emails? Any tips on how to minimize this?
Well, okay, so one of those is what we didn't have here, which is, the ongoing feedback from the audience. One of the reasons why I pointed out that I really like these breakout rooms that I had in HP rooms is that, it's very easy in a large audience for people to ignore you. Great. But when you got 4 people and you stick them off into a virtual room together on their own, and then you're not in the room, and you gave them an assignment, they just kind of like naturally are having to get engaged. And so you do that, you do those workshop things, and this is also the case in even an in-person thing. It's like you want your students to go off and do workshop things because you want them to accept responsibility for their own learning. Okay, if one of the problems I have when I kind of talk dirty about L&D was that we often have things like ethics training or something where basically people are saying, I'm sitting in here for compliance, and whatever I need to do to click the button that lets me get through here, I do that. For this stuff, you want that to not be the case. So the more we can have like little surveys that we have going on, raise your hand kinds of things, whatever feedback we can get from the audience, we want that. Having said that, culturally, an Asian audience takes a lot longer to give feedback than an American audience. So even as a teacher, you have to be comfortable with how you draw people into it. That's mainly it, is that, if people are coming for compliance, they're going to sit at the computer and do nothing. But you want to give them chances to be engaged, and I hope that helps answer that. But,
yeah, I think so. One question was, from your friend Jeff. He says, did Tata use these online quizzes to assess absorption? Okay,
so in the TBEM program, TBEM is the Malcolm Baldrige criteria, with extra stuff to it. And so the training was every year you go through and you train people in the Malcolm Baldrige criteria. This would be used in the companies, both because they're supposed to be looking at all their organizations against that kind of criteria so that they pursue excellence. You want them to be pursuing excellence. And the thought process of Baldrige criteria helps to do that. So that's the idea of what have you trained into people. When you say, well, what absorption, do they actually use it for anything? The second part of what Tata does is they send these people from that same training community out into each of these companies to review the way the company operates against a report written against that TBEM criteria. So basically the entire Tata Group operates off of that absorption measure of their TBEM assessment. And if they don't hit a particular number, they don't get to use the Tata name for their company.
Oh.
Okay, so there's, yes, there's a lot of things around the outside. This is what I'm saying. There's some kind of social stuff going on here too, as to things being pulled in by Tata. Now, as an example, like Jaguar Land Rover, which is a Tata company, it doesn't have to do this because it doesn't need to use the Tata name. but it chooses to do this because it wants people independently coming in and holding their company to a really high standard. So that's why you have gone off and wandered around Jaguar Land Rover and said snide things to them, because that's our opportunity to go in and say, have you actually picked up the idea that's in this TBEM thing? That you can't. It's not just that your car works. It's how you do it with your community and many other things.
Okay, so what you're saying is that there's a lot of ways to assess absorption of the material, and they use as many of them as they can, short term and long term.
Correct, but yes, that is what I'm saying. But I'll go back to what I was also saying at a point earlier on, which was that when you're doing a program like this, whatever program, in all of the three of them, it's about business results. It's not about, did you do effective training? I mean, I can sit there and say, did you get a score at a quiz next time, or whatever. That's not important. What's important is, did you get better results? And so you kind of want to have people not get distracted by the classic L&D types of things, saying, what was the rating of the trainer kind of thing. I mean, you want to watch stuff, but that's not the important thing. It's, has this helped results, and that's usually feedback from the leaders of the organization.
Okay. Well, this leads right into the next question. What kind of performance support tools have you used or recommend to keep quality at a high level?
Well, again, one of those is so I have these three sets of experience. So I got HP, which is a pretty good company, and the Lean Six Sigma things was saying, let's make it even. And there were many kinds of things that came up in that program to put into place, things to maintain and improve quality at all organizations. But then I had Huawei, and Huawei is just saying, I just want to get to ISO 9000, and so it's just desperately trying to get to a basic level. But when you're saying, how do I have someplace that actually will build quality? The TBEM thing that Tata did does that. And the reason I'm kind of saying that is that Tata is made up out of many companies. Some are very early in their journey, some are quite late. So like TCS, Tata Consultancy Services, which is a very good company, its numerical score on TBEM is quite high. And I would get up in front of the leaders of the Tata Group and give them one-page summaries of each of the companies and saying, here's this one, here's its key things, and it's at a 350. And then I go over and I say, and here's TCS, it's like at a 650. And so the Tata Group's approach to using something that is a criteria that can help them keep pushing, not a compliance. ISO tends to be kind of compliance-oriented, but I've been most impressed by the way in which the Tata Group does things mostly.
Okay, so in the Tata Group, they do these ratings using Baldrige-type scoring. Different areas will receive a different numeric score, and those numeric scores are shared, so that they know how each others are doing. I'm just mentioning that because in the Baldrige program, the scores are generally not shared.
Oh, yeah. Well, so, and I agree with that. One of the things I want to point out is that in the Baldrige program, as you point out, there's rules. I've been the Baldrige examiner for a long time, and there are many things I can't do in Baldrige because, confidentiality and so forth. When I went to Tata, we were able to see how we could take that program going where we didn't have those constraints, where the idea of the program was not to win an award, it was to get feedback, to do things. So when we have the extended training community, it was people from all these other Tata companies that came in to assess this one company. And every one of them wanted the company to succeed because it's all the Tata name. And so their feedback was always towards, that of a brother helping out. And so that sharing was much easier. But you're also right that when I was doing these one-pagers, it was the CEOs of all the other companies. You could see what the next guy was doing. And so that kept the social pressure on the top guys of each of these units, that's where we have very strong leadership, is by that soft touch social pressure.
Okay, wonderful. That clears a couple things up. Fantastic. Well, you know, we're about at the end of our talk here, folks. I want to thank Dan, okay, for his talk. If there are more questions, okay, post or email them. We provided you with Dan's email address in the chat window. We will include the email address we've included the website for Dan, and we're going to put that also in the email that comes out in 24 hours, so that you'll be able to go to his website. Dan, is your email address on that website?
Yeah, it should be. I mean, it's
okay. Good.
I got websites linked together.
All right. So you have questions?
And I'm very happy to engage on these things because, again, you know, there are some really strong best practices, and then, you know, that it would be fine to share, and I do value engaging with people.
Okay, good. Yeah. So send your email questions to Dan. Again, if for some reason you lose that, you may send them to us at QMD, and we'll forward them to Dan. So you're going to get an email in about 24 hours indicating your 0.1 recertification units earned for this event. And you'll also get a link to the recording that you may watch. All right. So it's time to end today's program. Okay. I just want to thank you all for, providing us with your attention and your questions. Okay. We want you to understand that, ASQ has more content, and you can check out all the different tools and standards and books there. And again, we want to encourage you, if you've not already done so, to create an account within MyASQ. We will be putting lots and lots more content in MyASQ as time goes by, including content from this talk. So that's where you can go in and find things as an ASQ member. So the Quality Management Division says, again, thank you very much. Again, I want to thank Dan for his time, and I want to thank each and every one of you for participating. We wish you well. We hope you'll stay in touch. And with that, we will say goodbye for today.
Thank you.